Hi there and welcome back to my channel. This is Sean, the Honest Book Reviewer. This video is all about May. Every book I read in May. Now, just like previous videos for this year, I won't go from the first book to the last book in reading order. I'll break this up into categories. Categories of books based on challenges and other reading things during the month. Let's get started right now. First, with classics. So each month I read a classic. I did start out reading 2 classics per month. Now it's 1 classic per month. What book did I read in May? I read Anna Karenina, written by Leo Tolstoy. Now, what did I think? This book is quite a long book. It is a bit of a struggle at times to get through, but overall I enjoyed the read. There's a lot in this book about people and society, especially at the time it was written. So we have things about tradition, new thinking versus tradition. We have things about hypocrisy in society, especially about kind of double standards between men and women. Thoughts about their actions and consequences of those actions. We have it centering around Anna, and Anna's spiraling into almost madness in a way in the story because of a choice she made, and also how people judge her for that choice. But then we have a male in the story who does the same thing. And he's not judged in the same way. He's almost celebrated in a way in the story because of what he did. People don't really care. Well, his wife does, but nobody else does, it seems. But it seems like everybody points fingers at Anna in this story. I'm not saying what Anna did is okay, that it was a good choice she made, but it's interesting in this story, and maybe during society at the time it was written, that men and women were judged differently for doing the same thing in society. Anyway, that's in the story, and Anna spiraling into that madness, into that darkness, is compelling and gripping in this story. It's a big part of this book. But I do want to mention Levin in this video, who turned out to be my favourite character in the book. In his chapters, it's a bit slower, but it's also quite deep. He's a bit of a thinker in the book. I like his thinking about philosophy, about society, even farming. He takes everything on board, and sometimes he takes things quite personally in the story. But with him, we have less melodrama. He does have his moments. I'm not saying it's all kind of flat in the story for Levin. He has ups and downs. He takes things on board, I think, sometimes too emotionally in the book. But those ups and downs kind of make him endearing in the story as well. As characters go in this story, he for me is the most engaging. I liked him a lot in the book. And as the book progressed, I liked him more and more. He's a great character, and I think a great construction in the story as well. I don't think this is a book for everybody. I think some people may read this book because they think they must. And some of the books on the classic list I added there because I thought, well, I must read them at some stage, so I'm guilty of that as well. But I'm glad I read this story because overall I did enjoy it. So during June, I'll read one of the 2 classic books chosen for me at random by the random picking program. So what books are chosen for me to choose between in June? Let's find out. The first is Kidnapped. Well, I don't know much about this story. I think about something different maybe than what the story actually is, but maybe I'll read this one. Okay, what's the second choice? Well, Crime and Punishment is the second book. Well, between them, they're quite different, aren't they? I'm figuring Crime and Punishment would be more challenging, a slower read, maybe a deeper read, a denser read, while Kidnapped may be more like an adventure story, more exciting. So I'm not sure what I'll choose for June. Now let's go to the random country pick for May. So for each month, a random picking program from a list of about 50 countries picks 1 country. And during that month, I must read 1 book from an author who was born in that country. So in May, what did it choose? The country was Mexico. So I have to read a book from Mexico, an author born in Mexico. What did I choose and what did I think? Let's find out. The book I read was The Story of My Teeth, written by Valeria Luiselli. Now, this book was quite interesting, it's quite fascinating and quite unique. It's one of the most unique books I've read for a long time, I think anyway. In this book, we follow a guy who's nicknamed Highway. And he tells us he's the greatest salesman of all time. And during his story, we're given his story from almost birth to death. And during his story, we're told about his adventures and misadventures as he goes about learning how to be the greatest salesman, the greatest auctioneer in the world. And all the auctions he does, and how he absorbs great wealth and makes a huge name for himself, and even has an auction where he's selling off teeth as well. So that's interesting in this book. And his story, it's quirky, it's a bit out there, larger than life, but it suits the book. The book's written like that. The book's written to be larger than life in itself. So everything we're told about him, everything that Highway tells us, it's larger than life, but it feels real because of just the way the book is. So that's what I mean about a unique story. It's very unique in many ways. It feels like a fairy tale when you read this in some ways, but also real when you read this as well. That balance was interesting. It was also quite compelling, having that thought in your mind, is this real or not? With everything that happens. It's quite interesting when that happens in this book. This book is also a bit metafiction. Now with metafiction, it doesn't usually hit for me very well. I don't really have a great track record with books that have that metafiction element running through the story. But with this book, it did work. And despite this book being absurd and odd and quirky and surreal, it's enjoyable and compelling. And if you want something different, something unique, get this book and give it a go. Not a long read at all, a very short novel, but do give it a go if you're interested in things that are different. So now we've done the country for May. What's up for June? Let's find out. The country is Poland. Well, I'm sure there's many Polish authors out there. It just depends on if I can find a book from a Polish author in my library network, because most of the time I look to my library for books for this category. What will I choose? I'm not sure at all, but I'm sure, I hope, it'll be interesting. So let's now go to the monthly prompts. So at the start of the year, I had 12 prompts, one prompt for each month. And for each month, I have 2 books for the prompts. One book is a must read, and one book is a read if I have time. What was the prompt for May? As the weather cools down, pick a book that feels like a warm hug, something comforting, nostalgic, or light-hearted. So for May, the must-read was Anne of Green Gables, and if I have time, it was The Wind in the Willows. Now, I did read Anne of Green Gables. I didn't read The Wind in the Willows, didn't have time, but I still want to read that sometime, hopefully this year. Then what did I think of Anne of Green Gables? Well, I love this story so much. When I first thought about this book, I thought a book that would be quiet, maybe quaint. About something in the countryside, maybe farming, about a schoolgirl, of course, called Anne, but I didn't really know what to expect with this story overall. But this story has just great depth, great heart, great characters. This book is just so absorbing and compelling. I really enjoyed this story so much. Anne is totally engaging. I must say Anne with an E. Don't forget, Anne has an E at the end. She tells you that in the story a few times. And as a character, Anne with an E is just wonderful. Of course, her dialogue is very long at times. It's like you're being lectured to a bit with her dialogue, but it suits her character so much. Everything about how she speaks in the story, how she acts, everything about her is consistent, it's engaging, it's compelling. You feel like by the end you know who Anne is inside and out. You know everything about her. She wears her heart on her sleeve, she hides no secrets. Everything about this character is just wonderful, I think. I think the author created something special with this story. Other characters in the book are just as compelling, just as engaging. I like them all. I like just all the ups and downs Anne has in this story. They feel so real. Her character feels like a real person. All the events that happen feel real as well. It's like this author just knew how to create this world that Anne lives in. Of course, it's the real world at that time as well, but it just feels so real in the story. Everything about this book is wonderful. I recommend this so much. It's a book about how to be kind, how to be kind-hearted, how to be just gentle, how to be a nice person. That's what this book is really about. How to accept people for who they are, how to show kindness, how to be you, how to be the real you against all odds, because that's what Anne is in this story. She's herself, doesn't make any apologies for being herself. She ends up being such a strong character, a strong person in the story This book, I think, is special and everybody should read this at least once. Now we're done with the May prompt. What about June? What's in store for June? Let's remind ourselves of the prompt. Winter has arrived, so embrace the season with a mystery, thriller, or atmospheric tale that chills in more ways than one. The must-read for June is Let the Right One In, If I Have Time, The Turn of the Screw. So okay, now to the random bookshelf reads for May. So each month, I have a random picking program that picks 6 books for me from my bookshelves. I'm trying to clear more books from my bookshelves. It's the only way I think I can do it. Got to force myself to do it. So from a list of about 150, 180 books, this program picks 6 books for me to read. Let's go through the books for May. Now I have to say, in May, I only read 5 of them. I thought I'd read them all, but when the last day of May ticked over, I realised I'd forgotten 1 book. So I'll try to read that in June. Let's go through the 5 anyway. The first is This House is Haunted, written by John Boyne. Now this is a classic gothic horror. It's got chilling events going on, it's got great characters, it's got creepy children, a creepy house, shadows, atmosphere, all that sort of thing in this story. It's quite well done as a book. Now the thing about this book is the protagonist, the governess, is quite different from what you'd expect in the time period. She's resilient, she's strong, determined. She's like the antagonist against what you'd expect women to be like in that time period, especially a woman in that profession. And I like that in this story. It makes her more interesting and engaging. Gives her an edge in the book as well. And there are certainly many moments in this story that are very chilling. A lot of shadows, a lot of darkness. The 2 children in this book are quite creepy, things they say and do, but they are written in a way that feels like a bit older than what they should be in the story. And also some of the things they do and say feel like, well, a bit overdone, a bit over the top. But it kind of suits that gothic horror kind of feel in the story anyway. At times, this book does kind of go to more drama, and it kind of takes away some horror things, some chills going on in the story. It lessens that impact of the chills as well sometimes. So I think that balance may be a bit off in some parts of the book, but overall, it's engaging, it's compelling, it's intriguing, it's interesting. There's a mystery there. There's chills and a definite gothic atmosphere right through the story, well, most of it anyway. And I think if you do like gothic horror, you'll enjoy this book. The Faces of Angels, written by Lucretia, Grindle. Now, the book I've got is an omnibus with 2 books in one. In May, I read one of them, and the second one is on my list to read some month. I don't know what month it will be picked, but anyway, this book, The Faces of Angels. It starts out quite well, or very strong actually. The hook at the start was just stunning, and I thought to myself, this book is going to be amazing. It was gripping, it was chilling in some ways, it had me hooked from that first chapter, very early on in this story. Then it changes, and for most of the book, a long middle section becomes very boring actually. It's about this character, about her shopping, about her going to museums and galleries. It's about all that, and forgets this mystery. It forgets atmosphere. It forgets tension and suspense. It forgets what it is. This is meant to be a mystery or a thriller. It's meant to be tense, suspenseful. It's meant to get you on edge in the book. It doesn't in any way in that middle section. It just flat lines, and it's quite long, that middle section as well. Then, for about the last 100 pages or so, it picks up again. It remembers it's meant to be this mystery and this thriller. It remembers what suspense and tension is. And again, that last section is just like the first section, had me hooked. It's stunning. And if the whole book had been like that, this book would have been a fantastic read. Definitely it would have been one of my favourite reads for the year. But I can't forgive and forget that long middle stretch in this story because it's very long indeed. Do I recommend this book? Well, in some ways, yes. I think in some ways some readers may enjoy this book despite that middle section. They may think it's good because it gives a good sense of place. It gives a bit of sense of purpose as well in the story, but it does forget about suspense and tension. So if you do like mysteries and thrillers with suspense and tension when it's meant to be there, especially when the first part of the story has that, then don't read this book, because I think you may DNF the book. If you're that type of person, you may DNF it partway through the story. But if you can get past that middle section and forget about it, or just accept what it is in that middle section, you'll enjoy the last section very much. So, depends what kind of reader you are if you want to read this story. Still Life, written by Joe Donnelly. It's a horror, a 90s horror, and it has that strong 90s horror vibe with a bit of quirkiness in there, a bit of humour, a lot of darkness. Now, it's not too gruesome at all. Not a lot of gore in the story. Even when horror elements happen, there's a little bit of blood and things going on here and there, but it's not too gory, not too graphic. And this book is set in a small village, and I like horrors with a small village setting, especially atmospheric horrors that concentrate on characters. It doesn't have to be jump scares, it doesn't have to rely on gore and blood and guts and all that sort of thing. Great atmosphere, great characters, great settings can create a great horror. And in a horror like this, even in a small village setting in the woods, when you think about expanse, you think about space, open spaces, it kind of feels claustrophobic in some ways because that atmosphere is done so well. And with one character in this story, this character is blind to changes around her, blind to things that make her feel better about herself. She's blind to dangers. And we have other characters in the book that kind of see those dangers, but this character forgets about them or ignores them. And I like that. It creates a bit of tension in those characters, tension in the story as well, adds to the horror and atmosphere because as a reader, you can see what's going on and you're just waiting for that moment when characters may realize what's happening to them. Will they realize or won't they? That's a question in my mind when I read this. It was so well done in the book, having that theme running through it, that theme about these characters maybe realizing something at certain times or not realizing it. Just that thought alone kept me going in this story, along with other things as well, like dark atmosphere, folklore, a lot of mystery surrounding the events in this story as well. So as horrors go, definitely has that 90s horror vibe, but it tacks on things like folklore, bit of suspense, bit of mystery, all elements playing out to make a quite interesting and compelling horror. The House Swap, written by Rebecca Fleet. Now, when I finished this book, I fell asleep, I woke up, and I forgot I'd finished it. That kind of sums up how I feel about this book overall. I didn't really enjoy the read very much. Now, this is meant to be some sort of tense mystery or thriller. It's really not. This is a book about a house swap. I mean, what it tells you in the title is what this book is about. We have a couple with a young child and they're house swapping with some mystery person. They don't know who it is. Now, in real life, if you're doing a house swap, now I don't know why people would do this anyway, house swapping with a stranger. You let a stranger into your house. You go to a stranger's house for a week or a holiday. Would you do that? Well, I wouldn't anyway. But anyway, they do this in this book, and we're meant to have tension. And there's a bit of mystery in the story about who the character is in this couple's house and why that character is there. And you may think you know the reason, but this book does kind of make you rethink things later on in the story. But as books go, it's less about mystery, about thrilling aspects. It's more about family drama. And the family drama is there for a reason I won't give away, but it's all about family drama in this story. And characters. Well, in this book, I didn't like any characters at all. I wouldn't have minded by the end of the story if every character had have died. I wouldn't have minded at all. And sometimes I was kind of hoping for it. Now, usually I don't do that when I read books. I don't hope that characters die. But in this book, I was thinking, well, it wouldn't bother me either way what happens to any character in this story. I couldn't really engage with this story very much at all. And especially the protagonist in this story. I mean, her actions, the things she does. I mean, I don't know. There's a way this book tries to justify it, I think. And I kind of think, well, is it justifiable at all? I'm not going to say either way. But for me, every character in the story, there's no redeeming qualities with the characters. They're quite hideous people actually in the story. And sometimes in books, I don't mind if characters are unlikable. I quite like books when characters are unlikable because sometimes it makes them more engaging. But somehow, this is a book where characters are unlikable and also I don't like them. That's quite a balance there. So maybe with what I'm saying, it gives you a hint whether you should read this book or not. You may want to read it anyway. You might like things with family drama, a bit of mystery there in the story, tiny bit. This book may interest you. go check out the blurb, read a few things about it, see if it does. If you do like this book, or if you read it, let me know, because I'd like to know why people like this story. I'd like to know why anybody likes books I read anyway, but for this book in particular, I'd like to know if people have a different viewpoint of the book. The Swarm, written by Frank Schatzing. Now this book is an eco-thriller. It's quite a long story. I mean, look how chunky it is. And it's quite small text as well. So I think it's about 900 pages, this copy of it anyway, and very small print. So it does take a bit of time to read. Now, if you like books like that are dense and quite long, then read this book. If you like thrillers, read this book. Now with this book, in many scenes, it has a blockbuster feel. It does feel like a blockbuster in stereo in many scenes, but in some scenes it feels too dense. In some scenes it feels like the author's taking a textbook and just giving us information from a textbook about things about science and data and the environment. That's what it feels like as well in the story. So there's a weird balance going on in the story, and I don't always think that balance is there, balance is right. But when the action hits, it does hit hard, and it hits very well. There are a few scenes in this story that are just amazing, and they're quite long scenes sometimes, the action scenes, but those action scenes, despite them being long, they're very gripping, very engaging and compelling, and many moments your heart's there pumping because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know who will survive. You don't know what's happening next, because there's great danger in this story, and the danger is coming from the vast ocean. I mean, you're on the ocean. Imagine you're on the ocean in a boat and suddenly you're attacked. Not by a person, but by animals. Maybe whales, maybe sharks, maybe dolphins, maybe orcas. Whatever it is, something's attacking you, and sometimes masses of these things attacking people in the ocean. Now, how dangerous would that be on the ocean if you were in a small boat or a ship or something with these creatures, these huge creatures sometimes, attacking you? Think about that when you read this story, because all those things happen in this book. In those moments, it's gripping, it's tense, it's even chilling sometimes. And I think overall, we have a story where the author's trying to give us his viewpoint on the environment, on ecology, on the dangers of not looking after our world. And this is his way of trying to tell us that sometimes nature may fight back. Nature is not forgiving. And maybe it's his way of telling us that maybe we're destroying nature too much. There's many messages in this story about nature, about environment, about respecting what we have. And I think that's a running theme right through the book. But overall, when it hits hard, it does hit well. There are some moments that are quite flat, but I enjoyed this overall, and I do recommend this as a read, but be warned, it is quite long, it is quite dense. So if you have a bit of time, go ahead and read this, but it's not suitable, I think, for all readers, because I don't think all readers these days like books that are this long. So what will my random picking program pick for June? Let's find out. The Gene Thieves. I'm not sure what this is. I'm thinking maybe sci-fi thriller, something like that. What about book 2? The Tower. I'm thinking thriller, suspense, something tense anyway. What about book 3? The Wrath of God. I'm thinking something to do with action, adventure, maybe conspiracies. Okay, I'll find it anyway in June. What's book 4 hold for me? Breakheart Hill. Now, I think this is a mystery, a detective mystery. I'll find it anyway in June. Book 5. The Night Spinners. Interesting. It's the other book in an omnibus from the author I showed you in this video. So I read one book in May, the next book will be June. I wonder if Night Spinners is better than the book I read in May. I'll find out anyway. Okay, the last book is... The Husband's Secret. Well, I think the title tells it all. This husband has a secret. I guess I'll find out what the secret is in June. Let's move on to ARC books for May, and I read 3 books in May that were ARC reads. The first is A Senior Citizen's Guide to Life on the Run, written by Gwen Florio. It's a cozy mystery type of story, and the concept of this story is interesting, very compelling, and is the reason I read this book in the first place. So the concept is, we have this lady living in a retirement community of sorts, and she's been on the run for decades, but she feels like she's found a home now. She feels like she's safe and secure, and she's got friends there, a life there, and she just feels like everything's running along smoothly until she has a feud with her next door neighbour, and that leads her to being discovered. Her past is discovered, and suddenly she's in danger again. She feels in danger. She feels like she has to go on the run, hence the title. And with the help of her friends, other senior citizens in this community, she goes on the run. Now that concept is interesting, compelling. It will draw a lot of readers into this story, I think. And I think this book is, just grabbing onto that resurgence of mysteries or cozy mysteries where the protagonists are elderly people. There's many of them at the moment in the last few years. I mean, it's been there all the time, I think, at different times in history, but I think just now, in the last few years, that resurgence is quite strong. And I don't know if all authors can pull it off as well as some authors, I'm not sure. And I think in some cases in this story, the concept is good, but the characters lack a bit of depth. The characters just don't seem that engaging in the story, that compelling. And then in this book, it kind of feels like sometimes action for action's sake. There's movement there in the story. I mean, the pace is good, but I think sometimes the character movement, what they're doing, is there just for the sake of having movement in the book. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. It doesn't kind of feel organic and flow well in the story. So I think this story is not awful by any means. Still a good read, but I think it just could have been better. And maybe I think some authors can write this type of character better than other authors, but I think fans of cozy mysteries, fans of mysteries, fans of books with a bit of humour maybe, a little bit quirky in the story, they may enjoy this book. So if it interests you, check it out. Murder in the Grotto, written by Amy Myers. Now it's a cozy mystery and book 2 in a series called British Stately Home Mystery Series. This book has a great setup. We have a cold case from 10 years ago. We have a murder mystery in the present day. So we have 2 things going on in the story. We have great characters and a great setup for that present day mystery as well. And the cold case itself was also quite intriguing. That could have been very strong in this story, could have made for a great mystery. But this book focuses too much, I think, on the haunting side of things, on the paranormal. It focuses a lot on ghosts and doesn't focus too much on the mysteries. So for me, that's a bit of a letdown. And also with the way this book resolves the mysteries, feels at odds with the actions of the protagonist at times as well. That felt a bit strange to me on the mystery side. Now with cozy mysteries, we need strong cozy elements. And in this book, I don't think we had very strong cozy elements. Book 1 was a lot stronger. In this book, felt a bit weak to me. We had the return of a police officer, detective, and it kind of tries to rekindle this love connection or love interest between the protagonist and this detective. I don't think it really works that strongly in this book. There is an advancement in that storyline in this book, but I think it doesn't feel that organic. Kind of doesn't gel along so cleanly, I think, in the book as it could have done. So for me, a bit of a letdown on the cozy side as well. But that setup of the story with the cold case and the present day mystery is very strong. The characters themselves are very strong as well. Just a few things here and there I think are a little bit weak. So I still will read more in this series. I want to read more in this series and I hope there's more. But I do hope that book 3 is a bit stronger, especially with the cozy side of things. The Serial Killer Support Group, written by D.B. Stevens. Now this is a quite darkly themed mystery and thriller. dark themes running right through the story. And it's interesting that this book is very hard to review, I think, because of those themes, because if you're too critical of this story, I think some people will think you're very critical about the themes. Now, I'm not critical of the themes at all. My critique is based on the story, based on the characters, how I feel about the plot, how I feel about things moving in the story, how I feel if there's quirky elements or not. That's how my critique is based. Now anyway, the first half of this book is amazing because protagonist Jess in that first half is just compelling, so engaging, just wonderful in the story. And just the way that first half is structured as well. It has this tension and suspense. It has thrills. It has a mystery. It's quite dark. I don't think it will suit all readers, this story anyway, but that first half is just wonderful. And if the first half of the book continued on for the second half, this book would have been amazing, but it doesn't. In the second half, we get quirky elements going on in the story. We learn things that changed the story overall. And I wasn't really happy with the way that played out in the second half of the book. That's my personal view on the story. That second half of the book would have been better if it would have carried on with more mystery, more suspense and tension. But instead, it's all about quirkiness. It's all about something else. And I can't really tell you what it is because it's a big twist. But just with that twist and what follows in the story didn't work for me at all. I still enjoyed the fact we have certain themes running through the book. I enjoyed that, but I didn't really enjoy what plays out in that second half of the story. It would have been better, would have been more compelling and engaging for me if that mystery in the first half would have stayed the mystery in the second half, with a bit of conclusion at the end that was more thrilling and more chilling and more dark. But towards the end, it becomes a bit more absurd, a bit more quirky. I do wonder about this because you do find out this book will be the first book in a series, maybe a trilogy, I think. I do wonder what the second book will hold because the way this book ends, it's a bit too quirky, a bit too offbeat. Doesn't really kind of match the tone and feel of the rest of the story. So I'm not sure about this. I'm on the fence with this story. I enjoy the characters very much. I enjoy many things in the first half very much. They were amazing. The second half of the book, I didn't feel very strongly about. So, it's better than average, it's still a good read, I recommend this. But, if you like your books to have, a consistent tone and feel, if you want a book that's darkly themed and very darkly told, without quirkiness, without something running through that will change the tone and feel of the story somewhat, maybe not for you, but give it a go. I do encourage you to read this and tell me what you think because it is engaging, it is compelling. But I do wonder if many readers think the same as I do towards the end, that the quirkiness changes this book overall. I did say 3 arc reads for May, but there were 4. The 4th book is The Devils, written by Joe Abercrombie. It's a fantasy, and the first book in a series called The Devils. Now, I like fantasy a lot. Always have. I've read fantasy books for many years, many decades. But I do prefer fantasy that's a bit more serious in nature. I don't mind light-hearted fantasy. I don't mind fantasy that's a bit, comical in some parts, brings light elements into it. But if that happens, I don't want the fantasy to be absurd. And in this book, the fantasy is absurd. There's comedy there, I think too much comedy. There's quirky characters, I think too quirky, over quirky. There's dialogue there with one-liners, I think too much of that as well. I think this story is just too much. It's too heavy with comedy, with one-liners, with quirkiness. It's just too heavy with that all the way through. I do get the impression that's on purpose. Of course it is, it has to be, because it's so heavy-handed in the story. And I guess some readers will like it. I think many readers do. But for me, it's too full-on with all those elements, and it's too much. The story overall is good. I like the story and I do like some characters, but I got a bit tired very quickly with the one-liners, with the funny quips all through the story, with the quirkiness. Just it was overdone, too strong, and it became too overbearing in the story. But if you take all that out and you pretend the story is not overly quirky, overly funny, or trying to be overly funny, take all that out, the story itself is compelling and well structured. The world building is still good. I just don't like all that overbearing comedy, the quips, the quirkiness. I don't really like that in the story, and I think it distracts from everything else in the book. But now on to other reads for May. Now first off is How to Solve Your Own Murder, written by Kristen Perrin. Now this feels like a cozy mystery, kind of. Not a classic cozy mystery, but feels like it almost fits in that subgenre. But this book has a clever premise. We have a lady in her 60s or 70s, and in her teen years she was warned about her murder, her future murder, and given almost like a prophecy with clues about that murder and also about the villain, the culprit. So she spent all her years since that moment trying to solve her own murder before it happens. But she's not successful, and her grandniece is invited to the reading of the will. But when she gets there, she finds out other people are there as well. And they're told a mystery. They're told they have to solve the murder. They have a week to solve the murder, and whoever solves the murder inherits everything. And if nobody solves the murder, nobody gets anything. So, this grandniece, other people are trying to compete to solve the murder. But what's interesting about this is the characters aren't that engaging, aren't that relatable, even the protagonist. And I found it a bit of a struggle to really immerse myself in this book because of the characters. And then we had this police character, this detective who seems okay with characters, going through and investigating, going to crime scenes, touching things, all sorts of things, and this police detective is okay with that. I mean, it just forces this book out of reality in all aspects. In a murder mystery, a case of murder, what sort of police detective would be okay with anybody else going through and touching things in a crime scene, handling evidence, all that sort of thing? It wouldn't happen in real life, so why does it happen in a book? So for me, when this book is trying to be more realistic than not, that shouldn't have happened. So that's two things why I couldn't immerse myself in this story very much. The characters, and also the fact the police detective was okay with people touching everything in a crime scene. As overall concepts go, it's quite engaging and thrilling though, so that concept, that idea, is one of the reasons I wanted to read this book in the first place. But I'm not really sure about the writing style, about the way it's told. I'm not sure about the characters. I'm not sure about different things going on in the story. So for me, it was an okay read, but many things let this down. House of Glass, written by Sarah Pekkanen. A book again with a clever concept. And a type of book that leads the reader down rabbit holes, down little paths and avenues that may lead somewhere, may lead to dead ends, but all those travels you make in the story are quite interesting. As characters go, the protagonist, bit of a letdown in some ways. She's not really flat. I just think she's a bit grey, a bit clouded in the story. And I think in some ways her past trauma is impacting the read more than it should. It kind of overshadows the case she's investigating in the story in some ways. And I think that balances a bit out through the story. I think less about that, about her past trauma, more about this child in the story she's investigating. That would have made this book more gripping and more chilling and more engaging. This book is slow burn. I think it's quite controlled in the way it's told. I do like in this book how the reader is invited to think critically about what's going on. I think many authors are just skilled at telling a story, but I think some authors are also skilled at dragging the reader in, making you think, making you question, making you observe things quite carefully to see what's real or not, and then really carefully making you second guess. I think in this book, those rabbit holes you go down, those rabbit trails, make you second guess things at different times in the story. That's a skill I think not all authors have, but I think this author does that quite cleverly in this book. That despite the protagonist not always hitting in the way she should in the story, there are other things in this book that make it compelling and engaging. Annihilation, written by Jeff VanderMeer. It's sci-fi. It's book 1 in the Southern Reach trilogy. This book is almost like a sci-fi horror as well. This book is also about atmosphere, it's about mood, it's about a mystery. Everything about this story is just so immersive. We have a team of people, and interestingly in this book, the people don't have names. They have professions. We only know about them as biologists, psychologists, anthropologists, that sort of thing. It makes them feel expendable. It makes them feel in danger. It makes them feel different than human in some ways as well. So this team goes to this strange area called Area X, which is an area that popped up out of nowhere. And it's almost like has a barrier, but there's a doorway, a strange doorway you can go through to go to this area. No one knows why it exists, no one knows where it came from. We have team after team going there to investigate and find out, bring back, information, bring back samples, bring back whatever they can if they survive. Because we're told in this story, not many people survive, not many people return. So this team's there, and straight away you're immersed in this strange environment. It feels like a normal environment in normal Earth, but there's differences. We have strange sounds, we have strange things you can find in there as well, strange creatures, strange happenings. We have people being injured, people being impacted in their mind from the environment as well. So I like this book very much. I just like the whole setting. I like the whole mood, the atmosphere. I like the characters. I like everything about it. It's fast paced. It feels dangerous. It feels like these characters are in danger all the time. That whole atmosphere just feels so dense and so rich. It's a great story, I think, and I can't wait to read books 2 and 3 in this trilogy, and I hope to read them very soon. I Cheerfully Refuse, written by Leif Enger. It's sci-fi. It's set in the near future against a dystopian backdrop. This story is about grief, about loss, but also about hope. It's about hope of finding things that are lost. And we follow in this story a protagonist called Rainy, and he's trying to find his long-lost love. He goes on a journey. He just leaves his life and goes on a journey to find this person, this long-lost love. It's about that in this story. It's also about finding people, about finding hope, about finding family. It's about found family as well in this story, and I like that concept in this book. There's a few things in this book that don't really work for me though, so despite the fact we have interesting world building, it's told sparsely though, so in this book we get sparse detail about the world we're in, but we get enough detail because it concentrates on characters more and about how characters observe and feel about the world they're in. So I do like that in the story. What I don't like so much is some of the events in the story feel a bit implausible. Some of those events that are implausible just feel off kilter. The balance doesn't feel right in those moments. But when you take those moments away, only a few of those moments in the story. Take them away and this book is quite interesting, quite compelling, and very well told. What I do like in this book is that feeling of hope, that feeling of quiet resistance in the story. Those characters, they're resisting certain things in this book, and they're doing it in a certain way that's not overdone, over the top, but also quite effective and impactful in the book. I like that. Even if sometimes those rewards are too easily earned, I like that feeling of hope. I like that feeling of quiet resistance in the book. The writing style in this book is well done. It feels quite lyrical, almost poetic in some ways. I did enjoy that. I think that kind of offsets that feeling of sparseness with the environment. When we're trying to be immersed in an environment in a backdrop, we're not immersed so much. But what we're told about the backdrop is very well done indeed. Overall, this story is very interesting. It's compelling. It is engaging. I think sometimes some moments feel a bit off kilter, off balance, but overall a great read. In Ascension, written by Martin Macinnes, sci-fi, but this is a book what comes about when an author writes a sci-fi story, but they shouldn't. This author should not be writing sci-fi at all. This book is trying to be literary sci-fi, but it's not deep enough to be literary, and it's not sci-fi enough to be sci-fi. I didn't really enjoy this book at all. We have a protagonist with no personality, with obscure motivations, with no real emotional arc in the book. And this book spends so long trying to immerse the reader in an emotional arc that's not there, because the protagonist has no emotions in the story. I'm not really sure about this story at all. I mean, what is this story trying to do? What is it trying to bring? What is the story trying to tell you? I don't know. And I spent so much of this story just trying to force myself through it because I want to finish it. That's the only reason I finished this story, because I don't DNF books. Overall, not a great story. And then the end. We have a chapter or a section at the end that feels tacked on. Doesn't feel related to the rest of the book in tone and feel or storyline. Just feels like it's tacked on for some reason. Maybe to add more pages, maybe to give a different viewpoint of something in the story from a different character. Who knows really why it's tacked on. But for me, it doesn't make sense why it's there at all. It just feels out of place. It doesn't bring anything else to the story for me. It just makes the story longer to get to the end. So overall, I don't think it's a great book at all. I wonder why this book even made lists for book awards, especially Goodreads book awards. I don't know, but for me, not interesting, not engaging, a protagonist that brings nothing to the story, a story that tries to make itself explain things, make itself be things it's not. Service Model, written by Adrian Tchiakovsky. It's a sci-fi. I like this way this book is told. We have dry humor, and I love dry humor in stories. We have that in this book. If you're going to have a book that has humor in it, dry humor is my favorite way of injecting humor and comedy into a story. This book has so much of that, and it's very well done for the most part. For some of the books, especially towards the end, it may become repetitive, but especially at the start, the first few sections, that humor is just brilliant. Anyway, this book follows this character called Charles, and Charles is a butler robot. In this world, it's almost a post-human world. There's some humanity left in the world, but they're almost prisoners in one small section. But for the rest of the world, it's robots and androids and AI to control everything. So in this book, we have 5 sections, and each section is loosely themed after a great writer or thinker in history. And the first section is my favorite, and it's KR15-T, I think, for Christie, and it's based on Agatha Christie. So the first section is based on a classic murder mystery, and it really is. So the start of the book, we have Charles, the butler robot, something happens, and we have all this going on about a classic murder mystery. We have robot police turn up, we have robot medics turn up, we have all these things cycling through that first section. It has so much humor in that first section that's very dry-witted, and I love it. That first section is just brilliant. 5 out of 5 for the first section alone. Then Charles the robot goes out into the world to find a new purpose, and through each section he has a new challenge really to overcome, and he meets other robots along the way, other characters along the way, and we find out so much about the world in each section and about how Charles learns about himself and develops, because for some reason Charles can develop into something he's not, and usually robots in the world are their one purpose. They can't grow, they can't develop, but Charles can. But it's very strange because even though he can start thinking and developing and growing, in his true essence, his true core, he's still this butler robot. He still has that motivation to remain in service to something or to somebody. That plays out in the story as well. So overall, I like this book a lot. I do think it becomes repetitive towards the end because we have these ideas of robots and things running through their programming, their cycling, right through the story. And for the first few times it happens, it's unique, it's new, it's fresh. But later on, it becomes repetitive, it becomes a bit old and stale. But overall, I think this story is interesting, it's compelling. I don't know if it's for everybody. I don't know if sci-fi comedy is for everybody. But for me, the comedy was good. I like the dry humor. I like the world building. I like the characters. It's a great story overall. A Sunny Place for Shady People, written by Mariana Enriquez. It's a short story collection of horror stories. Now, this is horror stories that lean into social commentary. And I think it's that new type of horror that people seem to enjoy, or some people seem to enjoy anyway. I'm not really a fan of it. I like more classic horror, more 90s horror, or more horror that's real horror without leaning into social commentary. I want my horror to concentrate on being horror. Whatever subgenre of horror it is, I like it to concentrate on that, not giving me social commentary tied into the story. Anyway, a short story collection which I didn't really enjoy overall, but I do have my favourites. My favourites are Hyena Hymns, The Refrigerator Cemetery, My Sad Dead, and Nightbirds. There are a number of reasons I like those 4 short stories above all the others, and those reasons are a strong sense of unease, they build narrative momentum, they explore trauma, memory, and social decay without losing the storytelling thread. I think in too many short stories in this collection, the metaphors are too dense, they're too over the top. And if you spend most of your time reading this and wondering about the metaphors, trying to work out what they are, what they're trying to tell you, then can you enjoy the short story? I don't think so, and I didn't. But I enjoyed those 4 I mentioned, and for the reasons I mentioned, but for the rest of the collection, I didn't really enjoy it at all. The Dead Cat Tail Assassins, written by P. Djeli Clark. Now, this had a great concept. We had dead assassins, or maybe undead assassins if you think about it that way. with divine vengeance. We had groups of assassins being hired for different things, and they had all these rules they had to follow as well. So for me, that was compelling and engaging concepts. But did the story live up to those concepts? Not really, because in this world, in the story we're given anyway, every character is over tough and feels like this comic book character in a way. It really does. It feels more comic book than anything else. And I wanted more fantasy elements. And of course we do have that. We have a bit of magic, a bit of things going on. I mean, undead assassins is fantasy in itself. But for me, too many characters with this overbearing bravado that feels comic book. Too many elements that feel just overdone to me and forced. Then we have a character who comes into this world from outside the world and doesn't feel fear, doesn't feel confusion, just kind of blends into the world too easily and becomes too strong in the world, I think, and overbearing in that way as well. Too much bravado feels like a comic book character as well. So even for me in a fantasy, I want things to feel a bit real in the world, even in a world that's not our world, a world that feels different. I want rules and things to be consistent. I don't want characters to all talk tough and act tough. I don't want things to happen in that way in a fantasy, even urban fantasy. I want balance, I want consistency, and I want reality based on the world we're given. And I don't think it exists in this story. I finished this story just thinking, well, it just felt too overdone, too heavy-handed. It felt like I was just hit over the head with certain things in the story too often. That's what it felt like to me by the end of the story. When Among Crows, written by Veronica Roth, a fantasy, a novella, but this is a book. It's a novella, but it feels a lot bigger, a lot broader than the page count we get in this story. That's interesting to me because usually books don't feel bigger than they are. I think sometimes you read books and you think, I wish that was smaller, but this book, I wish it was more. We're given enough to make it interesting and compelling and engaging, but I wish this book would have been longer. But what we're given is brilliant. I like it a lot. We've got characters that are super engaging, they're compelling, they're interesting. I like they feel real. They have flaws, they have emotional wounds, they have doubts, they have fears, they have challenges. Their interactions feel perfect, they feel so organic, they don't feel forced. Everything about these characters feels real. It's urban fantasy, we have different types of characters going on, we have folklore coming into it as well. That folklore just ties so cleverly into the story overall. I like so much about this novella. We have a romance angle I think so well done. It's a romance angle that doesn't take over the book. It just feels like it's part of the story, but not a heavy-handed part. It just feels like an important part, of course, but it's not overdone, not heavy-handed. You don't feel engulfed by the romance. It just feels like it's a part of the world and a part of the story and organically written into the world as well. For me, everything about this story is just almost perfect. It's a great read. This book is so compelling and engaging. I think it is the first book in a series. I'm not sure how long the series will go for, but I do want to read the second book very much. Incidents Around the House, written by Josh Malerman. It's a horror, a haunted house horror. Now this book didn't hit for me very well at all. I like the concept. I do like haunted house horrors. I like many types of horrors, but the idea of a haunted house is something that's just been there since my childhood. I've enjoyed it since then. I do like them still today, but they have to be written very well. It comes down to how the house is written, the atmosphere in the house. It comes down to characters, their reactions. If that's not good in the story, then the story isn't good. And in this book, I don't like the reactions and I don't like the characters very much either. So the main point of view in this story, well, I have to say the only point of view really is from a child. I think she may be about 6, 7 in the story, maybe older, I'm not really sure. But having this point of view from a child, it feels it's written like it's not from a child at all. I don't really get that strong emotion in the story. You think, if scary things are happening in a house, if scary things are happening in this child's bedroom, a haunting, paranormal things, you think there'd be really sharp fear, really sharp reactions, heavy fear, heavy kind of horror. She'd be horrified about the things going on in her room and her house. But it's not that sharp, it's not that deep and dense, not that dark. So for me, I wasn't immersed into the story because the reactions didn't feel real at all. And characters in this story don't feel real. I mean, her parents don't feel real. They don't feel like they're real parents. They feel so reactive in the story. They don't feel strong at all. And then we get repetition in the story. So it's like they're scared by something. They run. They find somewhere where they think they're safe. Then they're haunted and scared again. They run. Find somewhere they think they're safe. Happens again and again and again in the story. It's movement in the story though, so the story is fast paced. I give it that. There's no slow parts in the story. I like the pace, I like the structure, I just don't like the characters, I don't like the reactions, and that kind of just dims down the horror element. This book could have been more horrifying, more chilling, if the reactions had been stronger. And I think they could have been stronger if they were written by the point of view of an adult. I do commend the author in taking a chance in writing a horror with the point of view from a child. I mean, it's different. You don't get many authors doing that, but it didn't work for me very much at all. The one written by John Marrs, sci-fi, and book one in the Dark Futures trilogy. Now, I like this book. It has a great concept. Basically, it's about this dating agency that uses DNA to find your soulmate. Your soulmate does match to you through DNA. And apparently in this book, the concept is that everybody has one person who matches them through DNA to be a soulmate. It could be anybody. So you could be 20 years old and your DNA matched soulmate could be 80 years old. You could be in a marriage. You could be a man married to a woman and your DNA soulmate could be another man. You just don't know what's going to happen if you decide to find your DNA soulmate. And in the world we have in this book, it's been ruining people's lives since it started. So we have people breaking up marriages. We have all sorts of things going on because of people finding who their DNA soulmate is. In this book, we follow, I think, 5 or 6 different people. We follow their journeys through DNA matching. What we find out through their journeys is sometimes the results aren't pleasant, not always happy. We have dark things going on, we have traumatic things going on, we have very questionable things going on in the story. What I like about this though, it explores those dark areas, it explores dark moments, and makes characters feel real. Even characters that we question their motivations, we question what they're doing, they feel real because it feels like the world is real. We have everything in this story that just feels well structured, it's well paced. I like the chopping and changing in the storylines. I like the different storylines have different feels to them and the characters don't all come from the same walk of life. They're different ages, they're male and they're female. They have different results from what's going on in the story. Everything feels different in those storylines, but this book just kind of concentrates on not always the happy moments. It brings forth to the forefront things that are darker, sometimes sinister, people that feel duped, people that feel like they're being let down by things because of what happens when they DNA match. We have so much stuff that goes on in this world, in this book, that's not always sunny and pleasant and happy. I do like that because it just makes everything feel real. The last book I mentioned in this video is All the Colours of the Dark, written by Chris Whitaker. It's a mystery, and this book is very well told, I think, with some great characters and a great small town setting. The only thing about this is I think the small town setting feel maybe overdone. There may be things about small towns that are overdone in this book, but maybe that's because I don't really have a first-hand experience about small town America. I know about small towns in my country where I grew up, but maybe it's different to small town America, especially in the time frame in this story. The characters make this book what it is, and I think the characters are very well told, well constructed, and they have growth. The character growth in most characters in this book is brilliant. I think sometimes for our protagonist Patch, I think sometimes his growth is a bit questionable. I think sometimes what he does is a bit over the top, but he feels consistent in what he does and who he is in the story, and it kind of matches the story overall. And the reactions from other characters to Patch, our protagonist, feels real. So even though sometimes he feels a bit over the top and a bit questionable about just being real in the story, I think because the other characters kind of cement him more in the book, it's still okay and still well done. So overall, I enjoyed this a lot. I like the mystery. I like the overarching mystery and how it goes of different decades as well. And I like how that mystery motivates different characters and different paths in the story. It's really interesting how this one point in the story, one small point, really drives different character arcs right through the rest of the story. drives their motivations, their choices, everything, by one small point in the story. And I think sometimes life is like that. One small point in someone's life may drive what they do for the rest of their lives. They may always think about that one point, how it made them feel, how they think other people felt from that one point, what they saw as reactions or consequences from that one point in other people's lives. And it may just drive them to not make that choice or drive them to help people in that circumstance. I think sometimes life does work like that. I think this book is telling us that at one point in life can change people's lives forever. So that's all the books I read for May. If you've read any of these books, let me know what you thought in the comments. If you want to read them, let me know as well. Let me know what your favourite books in May were. I'll add them to my TBR. On my channel, I read books from all different genres. Check out my channel and subscribe. On the screen now is a link to the video for a book I'm sure you'll enjoy.